Okay, friends, we are on the cusp of holiday Pesach, Baruch Hashem, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, a very special day today. Many things happened in the Mishkan and eventually the Beit HaMikdash. This day brought with it, thank you so much, brought with it many brachot, many smachot. There were 10 crowns that were given to the Jewish people, and it happened today. So this is the day, if you want to be a religious Jew, and you want bracha and mazal in your life, this is probably the best day in order to get it. We're going to discuss a little inyan of Pesach, and it's words we say in the Haggadah that the Rambam and others are going to bring down lehalacha. The Haggadah Shel Pesach tells us, Chayev Adam, a person is obligated lirot et atzmo, to see themselves ki'ilu hu yatzam Mitzrayim, as though you came out of Egypt. That is what the Haggadah tells us. Every Jew, when it comes to Pesach, at the Pesach Seder, has to see themselves as though they left Egypt. What exactly do these words mean? Because I have not been to Egypt. I have no plans to go to Egypt. Is the Haggadah telling us that we are obligated to go visit Egypt every single year and to leave every single year?
The eclipse in 2028 is going to be there 100%.
You think so?
It is.
I'm done with eclipses for now. By the way, if anyone's interested, I have a special offer. For only $1, you get a pair of used solar eclipse glasses, used only once, $1 for sale. Any bidders on my plastic solar eclipse? I don't think so. Okay, so we're going to look at, hold on to them for a few years. We are going to look at about 5 answers to this very important question. And by the way, it's not just academic, it's going to have very practical applications that a person has to see themselves as though they left Egypt. By the way, why does it say that in the first person? You have to see yourself as though you left Egypt, not that they left Egypt, because the Torah says, but Seitim Mitzrayim, I was taken out. That is the pasuk the Haggadah quotes in Shemot, that a person has to see themselves as though I myself left Egypt. We'll start with the answer of Rashi. Rashi gives a fascinating answer and says, really you should see yourselves as though you left Egypt because your ancestors left. Your great-great-great-grandfather and your great-great-great-grandmother left Egypt, and therefore, had they not been taken out, you would still be there, says Rashi, and therefore it's as though you got out. So you can say it in the first person, I left Egypt. Because had they not been taken out, you would not be taken out, and therefore, actually it is your own personal geula, your own personal redemption. And that is what you should have in mind when you say this verse. Chayev Adam lerot et atzmo ki'ilu yatzam Mitzrayim. Fantastic. Thank you, Rashi. Comes along the Rambam, and he quotes this mitzvah from the Haggadah and the Pasuk, but he changes one word by adding one letter. And that one word and that one letter actually changes the whole mitzvah. He changes the word lirot, Chayev Adam lirot et atzmo, to, anybody know? He adds a letter hey. Hey. From lirot to laharot. What's the difference, my dear friends, between lirot and laharot? Because according to the Rambam, it's going to make a major difference. Well, lirot means to see. See yourself as though you left Egypt. Laharot means to be seen or to show. Laharot, to display. What does that mean? So the Rambam is basically saying that every mitzvah you do at the Pesach Seder and all the mitzvah doraita, which there's 2 mitzvah doraita we have at the Pesach Seder, eating matzah is doraita, Torah mitzvah number 1. Saying the Haggadah, Sipur, Yitzim Mitzrayim, is mitzvah doraita, Torah mitzvah number 2. There are going to be 4 or 5 mitzvot derabanan, and we all have our own personal minhagim that we pass down through our families. All these mitzvot are basically us displaying, showing that we were slaves and we got out. So when you lean, when you drink your dalet kosot, your 4 cups, when you dip the maror into the charoset, when you eat the charoset, all these are displays. You are showing as though you left Egypt. Because in Egypt, we were all avadim hayinu laparo b'Misrayim. Avadim, right? No longer. Now we're free. Now we are melachim. We go free. What does a melech or a malka do? They relax, they recline, they get to drink wine, they get to celebrate geula. So every single time you do one of the mitzvot, says the Rambam, you are yotze, the pasuk of chayav adam laharot, to show themselves. By the way, I know we laugh at some of the minhagim that Sephardim, for the most part, have at the Pesach Seder. I don't know if we have here any Persians. There's a Persian minhag among many families to take a onion, right, a scallion, and to beat our family members during Dayenu, during this minhag. This is a minhag that goes back. Right? In my family, it's an excuse to beat up the youngest brother, which was me. Baruch Hashem. And by the end of the Pesach Seder, I used to have green stripes all over my white shirt. And then we introduced a towel over the shoulder, beating each other. By the way, you know that reason for that minhag? People don't know. I'll tell you where the minhag comes from. The minhag actually comes from a pasuk in Baalotcha. And it says when the Jewish people left Egypt, they complained about the food that they missed from eating in Egypt. We're in the Midbar. They were eating the man, and there were many foods. I know it's hard to believe that Jewish people can complain about the food. I know it's impossible to believe such a thing, but let's just say it is possible. And so the Bnei Israel, when they left Egypt in the Midbar, they said, oh my goodness, Moshe Rabbeinu, back in Mitzrayim, we had basar, we had meat, we had avatichim, we had melons, we had shum, we had garlic, and we had batzal, onions. Oh, you don't appreciate the man? Hashem is raining down from heaven for you to eat, and you want to go back to Mitzrayim to get a good piece of meat, a nice piece of basar, and you want shum and garlic. So we take the onion that you complain about, and we beat you with the onion. This way you want to go back to Avdut? You want to stay in slavery because an onion? Here, take a zetz, take a hit, right? Take a klap, right? My wife speaks Yiddish. There's like 30 words for being hit in Yiddish. You know what's happening back in Europe. If they got 30 words to describe a klep and a kletz and a zetz, whatever, I don't know. Right? So all these words. So we say, no. That's not good. Other people will, I think they carry the Seder plate, people climb, they jump over water, I think to represent, create Yam Suf. What are they doing? All these minhagim really do have I spoke to one girl actually, I gave a shiur in a high school many years ago. It says in her family, they take a raw egg and bang it on the head of one of the guests. I was like, please remind me not to come to your home for Pesach Seder. Does not sound so good. I have no idea where that minhag comes from. Okay? Now, there are other minhagim. For example, we eat a egg, a beitzah, at the Pesach Seder. Remember that we're mourning over the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash because eggs are round, and that is a minhag to eat at times of Veilut. Also, there was a korban chagiga, a special korban they would bring on Pesach. We can't do that anymore. We can't even bring meat to represent it. By the way, as a side point, you're not allowed to eat roasted meat at the Pesach Seder because it's too reminiscent of the Korban Pesach. But the rabbis relax that gezerah and say if you add some sauce to it, like a rotev, right, or some kind of sauce to that meat, that's okay. That you're allowed to do. But having raw tzli, real raw meat that's cooked at the roasted meat rather at the Pesach Seder, that actually you probably should not have. And even the shank bone, the bone in the Seder plate, you can point to the matzah, you can point to the maror, right? When you say Korban Pesach, you should not point at it as if to say that's it. Okay, that is not what you should be doing because we're not allowed to bring a Korban Pesach nowadays until the third and final Beit HaMikdash will be built. Okay, fine. So we looked at Rashi. We looked at the Rambam as to how you fulfill this mitzvah. Says This is mentioned in a number of places. But we'll just use Rav Dessler to define this for us. Rav Dessler says, really, when a person says that they left Egypt, because remember, the Pasuk says, B'tzeiti Mitzrayim, I left Egypt. Chayv adam lerot et atzmo, you have to see yourself as you left Egypt. He says, actually, it's all to do with the timing. The timing. When you're sitting at your Pesach Seder, and it is the 15th of Nisan, and you're with your children, B'ezrat Hashem, and maybe your grandchildren, and your parents, and maybe your grandparents, you're schlepping out of Miami to sit at your Pesach Seder, you're actually sitting not at the Pesach Seder, you're sitting in something called Zman. Zman means time. Now the word Zman is related to another Hebrew word, which is Zimun. Zimun means to prepare yourself. What am I preparing? Nothing. Hashem prepared the time for you. It goes like this. Check this, a very, very important idea, and it's based upon Avram Avinu, who we know kept Pesach. Avram Avinu ate matzah at Pesach. How do we know this? Because we know he had 3 guests, 3 malachim, that came to visit him. And we know what was on the menu. There was basar, there was bakar, beautiful 7-course meal. But it also says that he gave them ugot. Ugot. What is ugot? Actually, the word ugot means round. Original matzot were round. This square business we get out of the box is all well and good. But that is not, my friends, the original matzah. Actually, the original matzah was not a cracker bread, which has the same text and taste as the box it comes in. That is a relatively new invention. It just gives it a longer shelf life. The original matzah was soft, fluffy, and more like pita. Actually, the Gemara says that matzah can be a tefach thick. That's like 4 inches thick. That was the original matzah they took with them when they left Egypt. It doesn't have much of a shelf life. It doesn't have any preservatives or any salt inside it. And therefore, the minhag nowadays, for most people is, but if you want to find, which you can find, this matzah which is soft and doughy, that is fine. It doesn't taste so great because it's got no additives, right? It's got to be lechem oni. It's got without salt or anything. So that's the original matzah. So we know that Avram Avinu, says Rashi, kept Pesach. How could Avram Avinu keep Pesach when his descendants didn't even exist yet, let alone get into Egypt, let alone leave Egypt? Because it was the time of Pesach. So listen very carefully. I'll give you a very famous, classic statement of the Rabbanim. And it goes like this. When you say the Jewish people left Egypt, left Mitzrayim, they didn't just leave a physical place called Egypt. That's not what it's about. They left at a time of cherutenu, zman cherutenu, the time of freedom. So it goes like this. We don't celebrate Pesach to commemorate the Jewish people leaving Egypt. The Jewish people left Egypt because it was Pesach. You get that? That's enough to turn your brain to guacamole and have it ooze out of your ear. I'll say it again. We don't celebrate Pesach now to commemorate this one event, a very important event. Actually, the Jewish people left Mitzrayim because in the fabric of time, there is something called Zman Cherutenu, the time of our freedom. Why was it that way? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Mizamen. He created the world and prepared time for us. When Hashem created the world, He didn't just create the physical world, my friends. He also created something called time. There was no time before creation. It's hard for us to understand. We can't even understand a world without time. My God, we can't even imagine a world without taxes. We can't imagine a world without time. And so Hashem created this world. He also created Olam Hazeh, Olam Haba, and Zman. It was Zimun. Part of that time is 15th of Nisan. It always was that way. And that was a time of freedom. Happens to be, Avraham Avinu was able to figure out when that time was. How? I don't know. That's above my pay grade. But he had some kind of nevuah. He knew this. What food do you eat at freedom time? Matzah. Matzah. Now, he never knew, probably, the relationship between them. He just knew we eat matzah this time of year. That's all he knew. Happened to be 1,000 years later or so, in the Jewish year 2448, the Jewish people left Egypt with matzah on their back, and they're like, oh, now I get it. Now I know the correlation between the food and the time. The mitzvah must fit the time. By the way, I must mention, I think I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. When it comes to the para aduma, we don't know why a red cow purifies us. So some rabbis say because the event that involves a red cow hasn't happened yet. It will happen. And then retroactively, we're going to understand why a red cow, which right now is a chok, it's a statute, actually purifies a person that lets them go up onto Har HaBayit. And as I mentioned before, there are cows right now from Texas and Eretz Yisrael ready to be killed, burnt, wood added, because there's a lot of wood added to the paraduma, and sprinkled to make us pure to build the third and final Bet HaMikdash. But don't tell anyone, because it's going to cause World War III and IV and V and VI. All right, so we'll keep that little secret among us right now. Okay, so that is Rav Dessler. He says, when you say I left Egypt, you do leave Egypt every single year, because the time itself frees you. The time itself, just passing through that time, passing over that time, actually frees you. By the way, according to this, that means you receive the Torah every Shavuot, because that's the time. That means every Sukkot, you get Simcha. That means every Yom Kippur, you get Kapara. How? Because the time itself gives you a Kapara. And there is an opinion in the Gemara of Rav Yehuda Nasi, this is not the halacha, but he actually says that Yom Kippur, without even praying or even fasting, just going through the time itself, is mechaper et haneshama. It purifies the soul. Because just existing in the Zman itself is going to fix a person. I'll give you just one final analogy to explain this. Basically, as you travel through the year, you're on a train. And you stop at various stations. One of those stations is called Zman Cheretein, freedom. And then you keep traveling through the year. And you get to Shavuot, you receive the Torah 50 days later. And then you get to Sukkot, and then you get to Rosh Hashanah. Each holiday is actually a station. So we are time travelers. We travel through time, get to various stations along the way, various chagim, and grab what we need to get us through. And that's why the word for a year is shana. The word shana doesn't just mean year, it means lishnot, to repeat. Lechem mishnah is a double bread we eat on Shabbat or Chagim. So the year repeats itself. The month is new. Today's Rosh Chodesh. It's Chadshut, newness. You get new invigoration at every single Rosh Chodesh. That's new. But the year, it's a continual yearly cycle. And that's why we say, Bayam Mahem, Bazman Hazeh. These events happened thousands of years ago. But this is the Zman. Bayam Mahem, that's when it happened. But this is the Zman for it. I'm able to relive that event. Okay, so we saw Rashi. We saw the Rambam. We saw Rav Dessler. I'll give you one more fascinating answer. It's a very mind-bending idea I want to share with you. It can change the way you look at being Jewish completely. Once again, let's ask our question and let's look at the answer. The question is, in the Haggadah, it says that every person is obligated to see themselves as though they left Egypt. Chayv Adam lirot et atzmo kilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. There was a rabbi from Germany, he moved over here, Rav Schwab. He actually had a Bet Knesset over here in Washington Heights. He wrote a book called Men Bet Shuvah. He forbade it to be translated into English, I believe. But the Hebrew is actually very readable. And he says the following amazing idea. He says, when Haggadah says, you have to see yourself as though you left Egypt, it's literal. Because you left Egypt. When I left Egypt, I was never there. That's because you don't understand who you are. What am I? You are part of Am Yisrael, Klal Yisrael. So it's true. They left Mitzrayim in the Jewish year 2448. That's 3,335 or 6 years ago. But actually, you don't understand what it means to be part of the Jewish people. The Jewish people are not made up of separate individuals that existed in the past, the present, and the future. We are ish echad, belev echad. We are one nation. So actually, when it says they left, what it means is you left as well, because we are one nation. We are am echad. It is one people. There is no past, present, and future. The Jewish people are really one big organic whole that spreads out right through history. He gives the following amazing analogy, metaphor to explain this. But this is real. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen a photo of yourself as a baby? As a 1-week-old or a 1-month-old? Yeah. Does it look like you? No, I hope not. Because if you look like a big baby, you got problems. Does it sound like you? No. Does it look like you? Doesn't sound like you. How do you know it's you? Because your mother or your father, your grandfather says, oh, that's you as a baby. Otherwise, there's no way of you knowing that's you. And yet, it is you. How can it be? How can it be that you were a baby, and if you were to look at that baby right now, even like, you wouldn't know it's you. But it is you. It's the same thing. The Jewish people were babies. They left Egypt. But that's a real literal metaphor, right? We know that coming out of Mitzrayim was a leda. It was actually a birth. Hashem birthed us, right? We were an mikerev. Hashem put his hand into Mitzrayim, like a doctor puts his hand into the woman and brings out goy mikerev goy, a nation from another nation. We were given birth. Actually, the man is referred to as lavan, the white stuff, because a baby feeds on the milk of its mother. Hashem was feeding us with the white stuff. And so when it says that we left Egypt, that's the earlier version of us. That was us. That was you leaving Egypt. But I don't remember it. You don't remember being a baby either. It doesn't take away from the fact that you were taken out. It doesn't look like me. So what? Still you. Now, if you were to break down the genetic makeup of the baby, you would see yourself inside that baby. But if you break down the genetic makeup of those people who left Egypt, you'd see yourself as well. The genetic code is still there. So when it says you left Egypt, it literally means you left Egypt. You don't remember it? No problem. That is you. The Jewish people are one people that were birthed, grew up, and still exist today, right up to the coming of Mashiach. We are one big organic whole. So when you say that you have to see yourself as you left Egypt, you're actually remembering something that happened to an earlier version of yourself in the form of other people. But actually it's your people. So it's you who left Egypt. That's answer number 4 to how you have to see yourself as you left Egypt. It's only our short-sightedness that doesn't let us see ourselves as though we left Egypt. We'll give one more answer to this question, and this comes from one of my great teachers and rabbis who I was obsessed with and had many meetings with over the years. He wrote, I think, hundreds of books. He was prolific. Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky. If you've not heard of him, go right now and buy a bunch of his books. So he has a Haggadah. He wrote many, but he was a psychiatrist. He actually ran a addictions retreat in Pittsburgh called Gateways. And he writes on his commentary to this piece that actually this is a mitzvah to see yourself as though you left Egypt, and the form of this mitzvah is to imagine. Now you'll notice that the Pesach Seder has a lot going on. There's a lot of things you see. You look at stuff. You look at the matzah, the maror, the Seder plate. You look at your parents, if you're lucky enough to see your grandparents. You see the wonderful foods and the smells. And the smells, you know. Smell, out of all the 5 senses that we have, do we still have 5 senses? When I was in school, we had 5. Now they're probably 38. But we have senses. The smell sense, what's called the olfactory system, is the most linked to memory, to remembering. When you smell something, you know that feeling when you walk in to your home, Erev Shabbat, or on Shabbat, and the smell hits you? Ah, Shabbat. Or you walk in to the Pesach Seder, or the preparation for the Pesach Seder, the smell hits you, you're transported back to your childhood. You know, it has an amazing, powerful effect upon people. And when you see the sights, you see the matzah under the cover, and when you see the charoset on the table, let alone tasting these delicious foods, I eat charoset, I immediately am transported back to being a child with my savta, my bibi, giving me the charoset that she worked on with the apples and the cinnamon and the nuts and the wine, and she ground, with her hand in the pestle, right? She's like grinding it down. It's just, you're a child again. it takes you right back. It's the smells, it's the sights, it's the tastes and the sound of the Haggadah. You know, when I hear the Haggadah being read, I remember my mother, she live and be well, who's Israeli, so we made her read the Haggadah because she was like a speed reader. Right? The rest of us were Megamgem, blah, 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 right? She was like, right? For you know it, there's the chicken soup. Right? Baruch Hashem. Okay, maybe not so good, but there it was. It's the sounds, the smell, the sights, all of it's there. It's a multi-sensory experience. The rabbis wanted it to be that way. But also we have imagination. And when you talk about our ancestors being beaten in Mitzrayim, you have to actually imagine the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, beating our ancestors. And when you talk about the Levanim, when you talk about the bricks being built, you have to imagine in your mind's eye the bricks being schlepped by your great-great-great-grandfather and your great-great-great-great-grandmother. And when you mention Pitom and Ramses, you have to imagine these Egyptian structures that our ancestors built in Mitzrayim. And when you talk about going free, you should imagine the elation, the happiness, the simcha that our great-great-grandfather and our great-great-great-grandmother had when they left Mitzrayim with matzot on their back and a makel and a staff in their hand, going free with myriads of Jewish people. All of this should be imagined in your mind as you read through. And you're going to get some help. You're going to drink 4 cups of wine. So by the end of the Pesach Seder, you're going to be a little bit tipsy. So you can imagine the simcha that your ancestors felt as well. It's a multi-sensory experience. And the Rabbanim were so clever in giving us these mitzvot that will enable us to really see ourselves as leaving Mitzrayim, to imagine in our mind's eye, says Dr. Twersky, because the imagination is a very powerful tool and can link us very, very clearly to the past. I want to finish with one quick story. One quick story. I have a very good friend, and we were in yeshiva together. He grew up completely secular, garnished. No Yom Kippur, no Rosh Hashanah, nothing at all. Pesach, his father and mother put on a Seder. His father was a very well-renowned doctor. And he put on a Pesach Seder. When I say Pesach Seder, it was a Maxwell Haggadah, some bread, and there was like 2 slices of matzah. They stopped, right, at the Shulchan Aruch, and that was the end of it. Right? Dayenu. The Dayenu in his house, right, wasn't Dayenu from all the brachot. It was Dayenu from the Pesach Seder, and that was it. He said he grew up with Newt. He went to public school, going in nothing at all. He says, let me tell you how I became a religious Jew, a Shomer Shabbat, and actually a big Talmid Chacham, and a therapist right now who works with a lot of religious people. He says, I'll tell you what happened. My father, during this Pesach Seder, quote unquote, would stand up. He would make his way to the front door. He would open the front door, stand there for 10, 15 seconds, and say nothing. And my friend would say, Dad, what are you doing? He goes, what do you mean what I'm doing? Eliyahu Navi is coming to our Pesach Seder. He's like, I'm sorry, who? Elijah, the prophet, is coming to our Pesach Seder. How do you know? My father and mother told me. Well, who told them? Their mother and father told them. This is what we do. We stand by an open door at the Pesach Seder, and we allow the soul, he didn't say neshama, the soul of Elijah the prophet to come in to our Pesach Seder. He closed the door, he sat down, that was the end of it. My friend Lawrence said, that 10, 15 seconds a year changed my life. It always stayed in my mind that even my great father, who had no connection. He said my great-grandparents, of course, were religious back in Europe. But my father was disconnected, but even he was willing to admit there's a neshama, there's a soul, there's an aspect you cannot see. It has the ability to visit us at least once a year. He says that was the reason I became religious. That 10, 15 seconds. And I thought about that so much over the years. We do so much when it comes to being machanach children, right? We send them to yeshiva, we drag them to Bet Knesset, right? We spend $1,000 on yeshiva tuition, all the things we do. It could well be, my dear friends, that one small, tiny, almost insignificant gesture that we put out, like standing silent for 10, 15 seconds, that is real and authentic, could be noticed by them, and many years later, they could revisit that one moment and be like, that's it. That's what kept me connected to Am Yisrael. That's what connected me to Torah mitzvot. It could be, and I've heard this in many forms, a girl come up in a completely religious family, but her mother did one thing. She lit 2 candles Friday night, and she blessed the candles. She said, seeing that, the lightings of the candles for my mother with a pureness that could not be falsed, fabricated, that changed my life. The rest of the week, nothing Jewish whatsoever. Shabbat itself, nothing. But just seeing my mother light those candles, these girls told me, changed their lives forever. One real, authentic moment can actually cancel out many, many other mitzvot and many, many other things that you put so much time, effort, and money into. That one real, authentic moment can change the entire trajectory of your family forever. Wishing you all Chodesh Tov, Bracha V'Atzlacha. May we see the Geula this Nisan at a time of redemption. Have a great day.